it to happen? And then you can ask the question, why does God allow it to happen? But anyway, let's take it from its nuts and bolts. And you're going to struggle to do this, I think, without Islam. That's the only problem. Because
I'll try and do it without.
I was just saying that because James SC is banging on about Islam in the comments, right? And we ain't talking about Islam.
We're happy to invite anyone on afterwards when we put a link out to discuss. But I wanted to touch on Brother Sabur's what he mentioned. It's something very profound, and that's a lot of this was profound actually. But there's something that stuck out to me was this idea that atheism is somehow linked with science, and there isn't actually a link there. The leap of faith that is required to jump between science and atheism is a huge chasm, and it can't be jumped. You can be a world record long jumper and you're not going to make that jump because it's not possible to do that, which is why sometimes you think that when scientists publish popular writings that aren't philosophical, like in journals, for example, philosophically recognized, they're almost writing out of their lane. They're sort of going out of their lane and delving into things, and almost hoping that because the average person on the street doesn't know the differences between these technical things, that they can get away with this idea. And Brother Sabur uses a term, and he used it in Speaker's Corner a few times, and I hope he'll elaborate. I'm sure it will come up later. The most atheists that we meet, and most of them atheists in the chats, and even some of the scientists who are working at high levels are what we would call socialized atheists. They've been brought up into this concept because they follow something underlying, which is called scientism, and this is almost a religion in itself. And I'm sure the Brother Sabur can expand on this. So that's very profound. So there is no intrinsic link between following or adhering to science and being an atheist. So this is actually a fallacious position, that because a lot of atheists will come to us with this perspective that I'm a science-based person, evidence-based person. First thing they say, and there's actually no link there.
And I think that even at that point, you have to science v Islam, and you're like, what are you talking about?
Completely. But I'm going to try and have a slightly different approach to this problem of evil and suffering. Okay. And I'm going to start with the very, very basic thing: the label itself. How are we labeling things evil? And I want you to keep in mind the atheistic concept of the universe and a theistic concept of the universe, because we're going to try and apply that label in both of these universes to see how that would happen. So let me start with and if your interaction here would be great, guys. So let's have an experiment. This is a thought experiment, okay? I'm going to start with a person with a chainsaw attacks a child and chops them in half. Is this evil?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. A person is on a step ladder with a chainsaw, falls off the step ladder, and chops a child in half. Is this evil?
Yeah.
It's evil.
Say again.
A person on a step ladder falls. So this is an accident. He falls.
Yeah.
With the chainsaw. Sorry, I didn't say accident before, but I'm clarifying. He falls with a chainsaw, and the chainsaw cuts the child in half.
Oh, it's an accident. Okay. Yeah. You say it's an accident. You wouldn't say there's no intention.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say no.
Great. So that you mentioned the word intention there. Now let's take it another step. A robot, following its programming, takes a chainsaw and chops a child in half. Is that robot intrinsically evil?
No.
Okay. So all of the actions are the same. The outcome is the same. We have a dead child in all three scenarios. One of them we would say is evil, and the other two we say are not evil. And what was the difference? Brother Sabur mentioned it.
Intention.
And intention implies a mind behind the action. That's quite clear, isn't it? Yeah. So if there is no mind behind the action, then that thing itself cannot be labeled with the term evil, because that's really just a judgment for the outcome. And so we go back to what was the mind behind the outcome before we decide if this is evil or not. So now take that example and apply it to the universe that, say for an example, that atheists believe in, that there is no creator. Can we apply to anything that happens within this universe where there is no creator? Everything is mechanistic, like the robot is mechanistic. Can we apply the label to evil to any action that happens? Earthquakes, floods, cancers. We can't. Why can't we apply that label in those in that atheistic universe?
It's devoid of volition.
Devoid of volition, devoid of mind, devoid of intention.
Yeah.
So when the atheist even raises the point that why is there evil and suffering in the world, this is an admission at a fundamental level that he believes there is intention, volition, and mind to explain the universe, or behind the universe. It's an implicit with the question itself. So you can't even ask the question about evil in the world unless you make this assumption. If you say that, if you believe that there is no God, then everything then no longer is evil. It's just an action, like a ball rolling down a hill, like a robot carrying out mechanistic things, like a guy falling off a ladder. And these are mechanisms, mechanistic things. They don't carry any moral weight, moral value. So almost immediately what we've done here is we've taken this word evil away from the atheistic worldview. So if you want to apply it, you have to assume God to start with. So now let's apply it to. So now the explanation. Let's go into the theistic universe. We believe that there is an intention, a volition, a mind behind the universe, and so what that means really is that we need to explain why this suffering might be here, why these evil things that might be happening, why are they there. So that's another tangent now we have to go on. So in an atheistic universe, you can't even make the moral judgment because there's nothing to anchor that with. In a theistic universe now, we have to anchor this somehow and explain why this might be there. So let's go to another thought experiment. So initially what we've done is to claim evil exists is to acknowledge the universe is intended and there is a mind of volition behind it. A theistic universe, the way that the problem of evil is often put is, look, God is all good, doesn't really want evil around. God is all powerful, so should have the ability to get rid of evil and must want to stop evil. So why is there evil? Either he doesn't want to get rid of it and he's not good, or he can't get rid of it and he's not all powerful. And because evil exists, therefore God must not exist, because those are two things that the qualities that God should have, two attributes that God should have. But let's do a thought experiment around this. This argument itself has a major flaw in it, and I'm sure that lots of people already know the flaw within the argument. And what it does, the first flaw is actually this: what we're doing is we're taking almost a truncated view of what people understand God to be. So God is not just those things, all good and all powerful, but he's all wise and he's all just, and there are lots of attributes of God that are deliberately sidelined within this. The second thing is there is an assumption made within that this universe should ideally be a place where there is no evil, and there's no foundation for why do you think this universe should be in a utopia for us? There's no, and this is just an assumption given without that basis. So let's do a thought experiment very quickly. Two different thought experiments that are very similar, based upon a possible world where there may be no evil or no good. So, no evil or only good. So let's have a look at a universe where you can't do bad things, you can't do evil things. If you want to have a knife and you want to stab someone, it turns into a butterfly. If you think of an evil thought, pink smoke starts coming out of your ears and the thought turns into a good thought. If you jump off a cliff, you start to float. Nothing evil can happen in this world. It's a purely good world. So the question then is there anything in that universe, this conception that we've had of this world, that we can say is good or that we can say is evil? What do you guys think of that?
Well,
can we see any action in that universe good or evil?
I would say not only can you not say it, it'd be meaningless to even talk about it.
Absolutely.
It wouldn't make any sense.
And why not? You're absolutely right. Why not?
But it's kind of like talking about 4 dimensions within this 3 dimension. It's just a concept which does not exist.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what happens so let's give the counterexample and I'll give the underlying reason why. So say if, for example, there is a universe in which everything that happens is bad and evil. If you try and give someone a kiss, you end up spitting acid at them and they melt. If you think a good thought, it turns into daggers and flies across and kills the person you're thinking about. If you eat some food, it becomes poison. Everything that is bad happens. And in that universe, is there anything that could be called good or could be called bad? No. The underlying difference, the main reason for all of this in both of those worlds is you remove same thing, the free will, the volition. The agency of the individuals is removed. So agency really, in a summarized way, is your ability to choose between right and wrong and choose and do those actions. If you take those actions away, those abilities away, those worlds become amoral. There is no good in them, or there is no evil in them, depending on which of those two examples you take. So to have a world or a universe in which there is good, you require the contrast. You require evil. To have a world in which you can say something is evil, you need the contrast. You need the good. This is like if you have a chalk and you want to write. If you write on the chalk, if the chalk is white and the board is white, you're not going to see the writing. You need the black board with the white chalk to see the writing. And so, as we would say that a creator is the maximally perfect being who would create the perfect universe. And we would have to, as Muslims, we would believe this would therefore be that universe. So the combination of good and evil that we see necessarily means that this is the best way for the universe to be. So I hope that was a couple of thought experiments to do that. So what explanation do we get from this? So one explanation is free will requires the good and evil to coexist. We have that. So we're talking about a greater good. That maybe we don't have the faculties to understand fully, because we are limited necessarily in our ability to understand, and our understanding of what's in God's mind is necessarily limited. Just like if I went to my professor and asked a question, I'm going to get to the limit of my understanding with the professor, despite his explanations. I will not be able to understand what he's saying, and that's my limitation of knowledge, and it doesn't reflect on the professor. The same way, my inability to understand whatever is happening in the world in terms of evil or suffering doesn't necessarily reflect on bad reasoning or anything from the creator. In fact, for me to assume that I know better is an arrogant position to take. And that's probably some of the things that we find people become self-deluding. Intrinsically, they become egotistical, and they start to delude themselves about knowing the best thing that God should have done or could have done. So one thing is the free will. The second thing is that, and that explains a lot of the human level interactions. So the other thing that people often bring is, okay, what about animals? Animals suffer. What about all of this? Why doesn't God intervene in those things that don't seem to make a difference? Why don't, when there's an earthquake, just stop the earthquake. When there's a flood coming, just stop the flood. When there's a fire in the forest, just stop the fire. There's a couple of things wrong with this concept, and I'm just going to, rather than explain, I'm just going to lay them out very briefly, and then I'd like to get some interactions from people. I think that people are asking for this in the chat. So the first thing is that as the universe, God's created the universe with some consistency, uniformity, and we assume this uniformity when we do things like science. So when I'm in my work, and I would be what Sabul would call a methodological naturalist, I take the theories that are prevalent and understood and accepted today, and I apply them indirectly onto people I'm seeing and I'm treating. So that is based upon the idea that the universe is uniform. Now, imagine a world where anytime something bad were going to happen, even to animals somewhere, God was intervening. This flood was going to happen, flood stopped. Earthquake's going to happen, earthquake stopped. Our analysis of the laws of nature would break down because they would not be uniform. They wouldn't follow a pattern that would allow us to analyze them. So we would end up in a almost chaotic world. And that's one thing that comes straight away to mind, that we need that. I think the other thing is that even if we are unable to explain the suffering of animals, etc., we go back to that same point. If God is ultimately knowledgeable and just and wise as well as good, then whichever universe we find ourselves in when we're undergoing this, and this is where the religion aspect comes into it, this test of life, because we don't believe it's a utopia, then this is the best possible way for the world to be. So that's really, in a nutshell, I've tried to, rather than just make it a thing, we've tried to make it interactive to underline the point. So the basic thing is you can't even use the label if you're an atheistic universe of evil. Just don't put the label in. If you're going to put the label in, you have to assume that there's a volition, a mind, an intention behind the universe that you're blaming, because you're putting the blame onto this thing that is responsible for the universe. So you have to admit that when you come with this question, this is what you're bringing with. The second thing is that the problem has lots of explanations: free will, wisdom of this divine being that was beyond us, and the assumption, therefore, within our understanding of what this divine being is that the universe that we find ourselves in is necessarily the best possible universe that we can be in. And we gave the examples of amoral universes or places because of a universe where you can't do bad, or a universe where you can only do good. I hope that's a reasonable summary.
That was fantastic, man.
That was really good.
We didn't even bring religion into it, which is fantastic. Which is what I wanted to do. I don't want anyone trying to start asking about Islam because we've not mentioned it yet. I think for this stream, what we're doing is enough. Let's bring the atheists on. Challenge what we've said so far. See if they accept our premises. See if they accept the principles we've established. I'll be honest with you. After that, I can't see many coming on, to be honest.